Hello, welcome to the Gab and Jules show. A bit like on Monday, well, exactly like on Monday's show, Gab is still in the US covering the Club World Cup. So I'm here in the studio on my own. I miss you, Gabby. I miss you. You're not there. I'm central now. But we have the Club World Cup to talk about again because we've had now everybody playing. We've had all the first games of this group stage have been played. There's a lot of things that we can talk about around the competition, within the competition. We were waiting on City and Real Madrid to play. We've had them. We will talk about them a bit later. But Gab, you wanted to start by something that you on the ground have experienced a bit with this tournament.
Yeah, it's what a lot of people here are talking in the US, and it's the attendances because they've kind of been all over the shop. You saw, for example, when Chelsea played LAFC, it was something like 24,000 in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is enormous. And people pointed out that when they played Newcastle 2 years ago, they sold it out. Obviously, the Ulsan Mamelodi Sundowns, for those of us who watched it, not only was it delayed by an electrical storm, 3,400 in attendance. Again, you can say it's Orlando. It's a team from South Korea against a team from South Africa. It's something that FIFA are being criticized for. I think it's much more complex than that. And I think we have to realize we don't have a benchmark here. This is not the actual World Cup. This is the Club World Cup. But maybe later on in the show, in the podcast segment, we'll get into this a little bit more, some of the dynamics, and also we're on the website. We'll be doing a deeper dive into this for those who are interested. But Jules, shall we talk about Real Madrid? Xabi
Yeah,
Alonso's debut
that's right.
against Simone Inzaghi, also in his debut, and it finishes 1-1 against Al-Hilal.
Yeah, and if you had never showed me the bench, Gab, and who was the Real Madrid manager, I would have told you that Carlo Ancelotti did Carlo Ancelotti things, really, and that team did what it did all season long. And it's only then when we saw, at times, I felt a quite frustrated Xabi Alonso, that was quite honest and critical after the game as well on the performance of his player, that you say, okay, it's not Carlo Ancelotti anymore, it's a new manager, and we had high hopes, and this is only the beginning. He's only been there 2 minutes, so let's probably not judge too much on it. But he really felt, I don't know how you saw it, but I felt it watching on television, that he felt very much like what we've seen all season long from Real Madrid. Not much pressure on the ball, out of possession. With the ball, not much creativity either. They score a goal on transition, which is what they're really good at, let's be honest here. And that's it. And we saw Trent's debut, Dean Huijsen's debut, which have been, some highs and some lows in their performances. But overall, I just felt it a little bit underwhelmed from Real Madrid.
Yeah, although they might come back and say, well, wait a minute, we missed a penalty late on. Valverde, of course, Bono coming up big as if it were the World Cup all over again. I don't know if we're going to read too much. You need to read too much into it for those reasons. He hasn't had time to work. It's coming late. They're going to grow into it. We're going to start seeing some of these concepts. But what I wonder is, are we going to see much more of Gonzalo up front? And is this a good thing?
No, definitely not. No, I know. I mean, Mbappe had fever. He's still at the hotel. Precaution. Hendrik is injured. I think Gonzalo is there. Like a lot of clubs, they've brought a lot of kids in to be able to play, rotate sometimes. In this case, he was the only number 9 available. You could have played Vini there or Rodrigo, of course, but he was the more traditional one. He got lucky on his goal, which was a tap in that he almost missed. Let's be honest here. And then there's a good header, but that was it. So I'm not sure we see much more of him outside of being just a squad player that can step in when Xabi Alonso wants. It's interesting that for the rest, it was very similar. It's a back 4 when Xabi Alonso is a back 3-man, obviously, as we know. So that might come later, again, with a bit more time to work. But for now, it was a 4-3-3 like we've been pretty used to seeing it.
Yeah, and you wonder how that's gonna evolve going forward. Like, there's a ton on his plate. I'm not gonna be in any kind of position of judging Real Madrid and Xabi Alonso's work right now. What is pretty evident, though, is Florentino Perez was in attendance up in the stands, and people say this competition is about money. Real Madrid very aware of the fact that if they win it, they bring back close to 100 million euros, and that is a big chunk of their annual turnover potentially. So we know that, I think the screws are going to start to turn early on Xabi Alonso. But we're going to break this down a little bit more and talk a bit more also about the challenges of this Club World Cup on the Gavin Joes podcast. Joe's a lot of curiosity about the debut of Trent Alexander-Arnold, who, of course, from here on out is just Trent. How'd you see it?
Yeah, and again, I had maybe too many too high expectations because he's just arrived, a bit like Xabi Alonso. He seemed a little bit lost at times in what he was trying to do. The rest of the team around him, who have never played with an invented right back, for example, are just, again, we need to adjust to Trent's new position, or Trent's position, which is new for them. So there's a lot of work to do, but I just think if you look at his stats from last night and his usual start, let's say he only played 65 minutes, but in terms of how many touches he got, in terms of what he did with the ball, it's quite similar to what he used to at Liverpool. The problem is, it's not what the team was used to have as a right back, and I think this is where the work starts really for Xabi Alonso. Not just how to incorporate Trent in there and make him a big part of this team and be a key player with the ball, for example. It's just who do you play around him, what do you ask of him defensively. Because again, yesterday, 5 duels, he only won 1, 5 crosses, there's only 1 successful. There's, I think, 89% pass accuracy, but the kind of pass you expect him to make forwards, they were the ones that he missed. There's a great diagonal early on in the second half for Vini, which I think is something that he could really add to this team, but he only did it once. So again, it's normal. There's a lot of work for them to do to make him a big part of this team, but I just don't think it's going to be easy.
Let's try to project forward, because I'm trying to figure this out, right? So we know Xabi Alonso has played a lot of back three, and we also know that one of the big issues with this team last year was that the lack of a creative passer in midfield, the post Toni Kroos era and whatnot. None of us believe that Alexander-Arnold's going to go back to playing in midfield, but given the way he plays right back, that he's not somebody who's going to go down the wing and skin you and put in crosses. If he does go to a back three, I'm not sure you really see him in the wing back role.
No, you're right.
Could he be a third center back who steps into midfield? And I use the word center back very, very loosely.
Yeah, I'm not sure he can do that either. And that's the thing. And again, at Liverpool, what made him also very special and good is the triangle with Mo Salah and Jordan Henderson at the time, especially. I think his best season is probably 21-22, even if they don't win the league that season or the Champions League, but it was still very good. And there was that triangle that was so efficient. Who would you play ahead of him? Let's say it's a 4-3-3 and that Xabi Alonso for now sticks to that. Who is your right midfielder? Is it Valverde? Is it somebody else? Who's your right winger? Is it Rodrigo if he stays at the club? If it's not, is he an Arda Güler? Is he Mastantuono? Is it Brahim? Is it somebody else that comes if Rodrigo goes? But it feels like to also help Trent and get the best out of Trent, you need to get this triangle right. So not just if it's a back 4, back 3 that suits your team and suits Trent the best. Also, who are those two players who will be the key more than who plays at left back or left wing back or left winger, for example. For Trent, is those two players really that I think will also have a big impact on how good he is for this team or not. That right midfielder will have to help him defensively a lot. Remember Jordan Henderson again. The right winger, like a Salah, could help him to be able to have that freedom on the ball, to ping those passes to whoever he wants and be that creative touch that you rightly said he is and they need. But again, if you get the not the right winger, then that might not work out exactly as you want to. So I think there's a lot of thinking, planning, working on to do to get that side of the team right. And then there's all the rest as well, by the way, because we're only talking about Trent, but I'm not sure the rest works that well so far as we saw last night.
I think that's exactly it, Jules. I mean, if we're going to go and disassemble the whole team and put it back together again to suit Trent, to suit one player, it's Trent, sure, but there's other players who, I'll come out and say it, are more important than Trent and are better, and the team has invested more in, from Jude Bellingham to Vini to obviously Kylian Mbappe. So you would think if Xabi Alonso is going to be, is going to have to be pragmatic, come up with, ask people to make sacrifices, move things around, surely you would do it for your big difference makers, who you expect to be Mbappe, Bellingham, and Vini, not at this stage for your free agent right back signing. So I think it's going to be really interesting how this pans out and how he makes the pieces fit together. And also back three, I'm not sure even with Heisen and I'm not sure you're going to have the numbers to do that. So I personally would expect them to go 4-3-3, keep things a little simpler, at least for the first few months.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But Jules, I want to go back to this issue of staging a competition in the U.S. I feel like we're time traveling back to 1994 when there was a lot of debates, about when you schedule the game, who plays when. We've talked about the attendances a little bit. We'll get to that in a minute. One thing that struck a lot of people is the kickoff times here on the East Coast of the United States, anyway, are sort of 12, 3, 6, and 9, which is, pretty standard. You have a game, and then there's a break, and there's another game, and so on. One of the arguments, a lot of the bigger teams have kicked off at 12 or at 3 o'clock, the big European sides. And the idea is that, it's for television in Europe, because it's prime time there. Whereas, those 9 p.m. East Coast kickoffs kick off at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning in Europe. Is this something that you think is intentional? Is this something they should be paying attention to, or to try to get people interested? Because it comes at the expense of making teams go out and play in the midday sun, which is not really a great thing, as we saw from Atletico, as we saw from Real Madrid as well, playing out there on the West Coast with a noon kickoff local time.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an issue, but I don't think it's an issue that you can solve. Of course, you want your biggest market really for this tournament is, again, well, maybe not your biggest market, but it's Europe, but people are going to tune in to watch their teams, or to watch the teams that they used to watch from their leagues, from their country, from their favorite players, whatever. So you can understand why FIFA want Real Madrid to play at 8 o'clock in the UK or 9 o'clock in Central Europe, for example. That makes a lot of sense, more than at 2 a.m. Especially when it's a big game. So when they would play against another European team or a top team, or even later in the competition, is to the detriment of the players and the quality of the games. There's no doubt, Gabi, for sure. We saw a lot of games, those early kickoffs start well, good first half, and then the rhythm drop naturally because it's 40 degrees, the humidity is 70%. It's, again, even lunch kickoff time on a Saturday in the UK, some players struggle with it. So imagine just over there in the US with all the thing we've just explained. So I don't know if there's a right answer or if there's a solution to make it differently. I think it's just the way it is, and it would be probably similar at the World Cup as well next year.
Yeah, and having games with these earlier daytime kickoffs has had another impact. That's a big impact on attendance, right? Because the thinking is, people are at work and so on. People are going to take time off work and whatever. I'm in two minds about this, in the sense that sometimes more than one thing can be true, Jules. Yeah, obviously, if your team isn't playing, the team that you support, but there's a Club World Cup game in your town, are you going to take time off work, blah, 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 to go and watch another team? Maybe not. But then again, this is a big country. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of kids. The school has finished. There's no question that they could have done a better job in terms of really promoting the crap out of it. Going to local football academies, bringing kids in, just to put more people in the stands. And I think this has been a learning process. When we see the big European clubs come on tour to the US and they're in sold out stadiums, and there's a lot of work that goes into it from the local promoters and from the clubs themselves, getting their supporters groups out there and whatever, to make sure that the stadiums are full.
But those
I
kickoffs
don't
are
think that's
late
happened.
because those clubs, those European clubs, don't care if back home, fans watch at 4 a.m. or not, because some of those games are not even broadcasted in the UK or in France or in Germany or in Italy. And so that's easier then because you can plan your game at 8 p.m. on the West Coast, for example, which people would turn up. It's a lovely evening in LA. People are out. You go out. It makes sense because then in that case, you don't really care about European market.
Yeah.
And those clubs just care about the US market. That's why they're there on tour. That's who they want to target. So it's logic for this one. It's a different dynamic, right? Because for FIFA's interest, you also want those big European teams at that in those kind of time slot, and that's where the dilemma and a bit of difficulty is.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this whole FIFA ticketing operation, it just feels as if it's been rushed.
Yeah.
They haven't fully thought things through. They haven't fully thought through the differences between the different markets. And some people say they maybe should have. I was just talking to somebody about this, that they could have leaned more on the local expertise because in this country, you can market things, you can put bums on seats, that they say it can be more difficult, but for the right event, you can do it. One thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of how it's been received in Europe, part of the debate has been, some of these big stadiums that are near empty. I was at the link the other day, and like I said, it wasn't bad. I think it was about 35,000 in a 68,000 seat stadium, Lincoln Financial Field, where my Philadelphia Eagles play. But it wasn't great either. And some people had said, well, we should have had it in smaller stadiums. And it would have looked good because the stadium would have looked full. Some stadiums, of course, are smaller, like Audi Field or where Ulsan played Mamelodi and Sundowns in Orlando. Would you have wanted the MLS stadiums as opposed to the big NFL ones?
Yeah, and we've said it. I said it to you on the show before. I can understand the economic dynamic there and what you want from a FIFA point of view and tickets and everything. And of course, a bigger stadium, nicer stadium is better. But it looks better if it's full. It doesn't look that great if it's half empty, and there's a lot of empty seats everywhere. So I've always thought that some of those games could have been easily scheduled in smaller arenas and smaller stadiums, but again, I completely understand the finance side of it, and I've got no issue with it. If it's still better, for example, for FIFA to have 40,000 people in a 70,000 seater than 25 in a 25,000 seater, for example, that I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, I think FIFA also made it a point that and that's why they introduced a dynamic pricing, and they got hammered for this because the prices were so high at the start for tickets. But of course, they crashed just about everywhere. They said we want to make sure that anybody who wants to go to a game can go to a game. We have these big stadiums. It's also a question of seeing how these stadiums work, the logistics ahead of the World Cup. And they say that this was part of the thinking, and they point out that they got crowds of 80,000, right, in LA for PSG and Atletico Madrid, for example, right?
Yeah.
So they can put them out there. Obviously, Ulsan against Sundowns in Orlando was going to be a much tougher sell, especially when there's an electrical storm. I just hope, Jules, that that they learn things ahead of the World Cup. And there is a lot to learn because there's a lot going on in this country right now, right down to the weather. We've already had 2 games that were delayed because of weather, which seems crazy in June. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I think it's a learning exercise, and hopefully they get this right come next summer.